Hello, this will be part 33 in the series An Ancient Legacy, and throughout them we've just been cataloguing ancient sites from, well, the beginning of officially recorded history uh, up to the great cathedrals, and in earlier series episodes gone through, well, the capital cities: Washington, Canberra, Brasilia, Astana, London, Paris, New York, state capitals in the USA, and how these very important cathedrals, major public buildings, city plans, dimensions, all within, always contain the same set of a very specific set of numbers, and that's because it's comes from this tradition of Thoth, Hermes, or Mercury, the gods of weights and measures, gods of knowledge, gods of science, gods of technology, essentially the gods of engineering behind the temple plans, the temple designs. And the last few episodes are focused on New Jerusalem and some the similarities between the flood legends, such as that of in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Manu, but also how that will connect to New Jerusalem, or the Holy City, which is such an important reference in cathedrals up into the modern esoteric era, especially not to focus, but because everyone knows Freemasons, but it also would apply Rosicrucians, Theosophy, the Templars, and other such groups as well. And but with now the comparison, so we'll be looking especially at the Epic of Gilgamesh and Tablet 11, which describes the flood story as Gilgamesh goes to visit his ancestor Utnapishtim, who tells him the story of the flood. Now, the oldest tablets which describe the flood legend seem to more describe a round boat. However, the Tablet 11 and the fuller version of this epic, which was probably written about 1500 BC, around about the same time as the Vedas and these other points, well, they're not so specific about it, but they do. Well, essentially, it's describing a cube. Now, Irving Finkelstein, he's done some. He's a special. He's a British Museum, specialises in the tablets and and Sumer, the earlier periods of Babylon. And again, so just a reference. I'll put a link in the description to that as well. Just about the round boats as compared to this cube, but whether it's well, they have to say they're essentially describing a cube. We see that still repeated, whether it's the modern esoteric sculptures such as Tony Rosenthal or Constantine Demopoulos, and again these black cube or glass cubes as well. So they're not always black, but they're containing consistently, always they contain the same set of numbers and or especially numbers using ancient measures that we've seen throughout this series, which are 27.3 and 29.53. 29.53 days per synodic month or full moon, 27.3 days per sidereal month. Sun, Earth, Moon, and star connections, which of course is referenced constantly since ancient times through symbolism right up to the modern period. But the preserver of life, or the Ark of Utnapishtim, is described as 120 its walls, and that's okay. So this is why this Tablet 11 from this version, they're really describing a cube. It's the walls are 120 cubits high. Its sides and top were of equal length. So unlike the earlier version, which would be pointing more towards a rounded boat, we do have a cube being described here, very much the same as in what is in New Jerusalem. But what's interesting now throughout this series, ancient units of measure have been like 120 Babylonian royal cubits, 1.5 feet per cubit, so that's 120 Royal Babylonian feet. Now that's an accepted, different units have different breakdowns, but 180 Royal Babylonian feet would be that conversion, and that would equal 180 Indus feet, as in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, and that just so happens to have been used up until the period of Queen Elizabeth I, Edmund Gunter, and when the allegedly modern English foot took hold of a mile of 280 feet. Well, that's the Saxon foot's being used since that time. Especially earlier I mentioned how this particular unit, which links the Saxon foot as well as Indus and the Sumerian civilization, well, it also wonderfully connects to the Great Pyramid, because including the sockets, which are so important in giving the proportion of the size of the Earth to the Great Pyramid, You can't just use a pyramid, you have to use the sockets and you have to use the socle or the paving stones. And at 440 of these cubits created by this pendulum, so a 1 meter exactly pendulum would create exactly 1 Egyptian royal cubit, which describes the base and height of the pyramid itself. But the Indus or Sumerian or Saxon pendulum cubit describes the pyramid including the sockets at the corner as well at 440 once again. Now that's, well, now that these specific numbers and measures reoccur and connect, I believe it's passing on this ancient system of the knowledge of Thoth or Hermes or Mercury as called by the Romans, which will connect to the quadrivium, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. And so, for instance, whether it's the vesica or the triangle, but also we see both on the Ionic scale and on this Longfoot scale, the Persian or the Longfoot, we have a description of the moon there. Now, Thoth was the god of the moon. Now, the breakdown of the Royal Babylonian cubit into 1.5 feet per cubit also breaks down into fingers and grains, and that's at 3,600 and 21,600. And so the 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute, this goes back to the Sumerian number system, which was based around 60. It's really based around 12, but why do we use 60 so often in weights and measures, especially in time and the compass? Well, it's a legacy here because this number is, I'm not sure of the exact term of it, but it's all these numbers are the opposite of prime numbers. So a prime number is only divisible by 1 in itself. These numbers have a maximum number of divisions, and so for instance the 12-inch foot, you can divide it into thirds, 4 inches, or you can divide it into quarters, 3 inches. It's a lovely way to divide it up into fractions as opposed to base 10. If you divide it into thirds, you get 3.33333 on to infinity. So that's why base 12, some people still think we should return to base 12, and 120 cubits is a reference again to this base 12 or base 60 number system. But 360 degrees in the compass, each degree of a compass has 3,600 seconds, and each degree's based is broken up into 60 minutes. Also now, so there are 21,600 minutes in a 360 degree compass, so 21,600. And also in time, 3,600 seconds per hour as an example, and there we see, so the clock and the compass are connected with both these numbers, but we also find it as one of these very important numbers in the Mayan system, and also it describes the moon as well. So we see sun, earth, moon, geometry, etc. 3,600 degrees describing the icosahedron. Cosine 36 is the golden number -1/2, 36 degrees in the pentagram, which is again perfect representation of phi. The vesica, of course, 360 degrees in the circle, and any, the square or a rectangle or any four-sided poly is described by 360 degrees. So that's very nice, very lovely number in geometry. But also the 21,600 minutes of the compass is literally where the 21,600 nautical mile circumference of the Earth comes from. But also at 2,160 miles, we get a lovely description of the mean diameter of the moon. Also, it would refer to the cycle of precession, so the 12 ages in the great year, each would, on average, because they're not, each age is not exactly the same, it's not perfectly divided up into 12, but 2,160 years per Platonic month. Of course, the Vesica repeats this as well, and New Jerusalem, the walls of 144 cubits high or 216 feet. And Platonic solid, once again, so two-dimensional as well as three-dimensional geometry, once again, as we saw in the icosahedron, for instance. And the cube, and of course, 6 cubes, 6 times 6 times 6, 216. And it's also a very cool number across the third dimension, so we have this other aspect going on in there as well. Now at 120 cubits, so each edge, the edge length of the
preserver of life, 120 cubits, 120 Royal Babylonian cubits, or Sumerian scale. It also just happens to convert at 12 rods or perch. Now, one rod is 16.5 feet, or 1/2 of 33, and New Jerusalem, the Holy City, is described as 12,000 furlong or 12,000 stadia each edge length, again describing a cube of equal height, width and length, and that just happens to convert to 12 and a whole bunch of zeros. That's 1,200,000,000 Persian long fingers. The Persian scale, the long scale, will be a constant repeater throughout this, because all of this building, these descriptions describe not only by definition because of the cube of 12, but also their conversion points between multiple ancient units of measure, coming back to these very harmonic, very important numbers that we just see consistently across ancient sites, and especially connected to up from the ancients, unbroken up until this day, and to places like the state capitals, national capitals, major cathedrals, major public buildings, major public memorials. Again, not cherry picking some random building to find it. It's you find the biggest building in the center of the town or the city, and you begin from there, and all the monuments which are connected to it. So it's just not to knock that on the head. Now, why is 12? Well, 12 is this number, again, that resonates. So it's like 12 apostles, 12 people on a jury, or 12 people on a board is the most common. But again, the vesica, the geometry, or 12 inches per foot, again, it's a nice number across 3 dimensions in this aspect as well. But okay, so the 12 constellations of the zodiac, or the 12 ages, or the 12 Platonic months in the precessional cycle, or 12 months of the calendar year. Now, you also find, as well as New Jerusalem, the Temple of Solomon, especially amongst the Freemason tradition, it's just so important. King Hiram, who the master mason who taught King Solomon and his priests how to build this Holy of Holies, which contained the Ark of the Covenant back in the day, but also the Kali Yuga, so at 432,000 years for the cycle, that breaks down into 1,200 divine years. So again, this references, multiple references to 12 across these very important legends, which again go throughout time. Now, it just so happens, like say the Persian or the long scale, which happens to convert just coincidentally again at this scale of 12. Now, each Persian or long or long foot is 1.056 feet. Divide that by 2 and you get 0.528. Divide that by 2, you get, and then divide it by 2, divide it by 2 will bring you back to 33, as in 16.5 feet is 1 rod, or half of 33. 33, okay, very important number, and we referenced again in this building using multiple ancient sets of measure. Now, it's interesting, so 1,200 furlong, using the King James Version, just so happens to connect to 105600 span. Again, we see this scale. The actual scale conversion point is described in the building, and even the maximum visible base length of this cube, and that just so happens to describe the maximum visible base length of the Great Pyramid on the sacred Jewish cubit, which is 5/6 Royal Egyptian cubits. And so again, we just see this particular number, not only the conversion ratio, but also the number itself in units of measure is repeated over. Now, so 120 Royal Babylonian cubits just happens to convert to 130 cubits on the so-called modern scale, and that will also create a 132,000 fathom conversion in the Holy City, New Jerusalem. And why 132? Well, again, now on the long scale, that 1.056, that describes the mean diameter of the Earth in yards. In ancient, older systems of measurement, so whether it's butter, milk, cloth, they all had different ratios, and 132, or fish per last. And of course, it will appear in the nonagon, which has these up 132, 792, 144. We'll see these numbers reappear again.
And it just so happened, so once again, the preserver of life, Ark of Utnapishtim, repeating these and the patterns which would later be described in New Jerusalem at 12,000 furlong. That's the King James Version, which was written directly after the period of Queen Elizabeth I and Edmund Gunter, who now these measurements such as the chain, 10 chain is 1 furlong. But what we have is again this so 264 span on the modern, allegedly modern imperial scale, how that converts to 26440 yards. And this is again a lovely number, which it's a conversion point. So in the Ionic or the long or the Persian scale as well as league, so 3 miles is 1 league. What we have is 264 being creating a unity point between multiple ancient sets of measure and describing the Earth. And also on the what's called the canonical cubit, that's 1.728. 1728 we'll see this number repeated, but 1.728 feet is one canonical cubit. So we have also a reference to the sun there. Now the canonical cubit, few question marks over it even myself, but I include it because again it's just a nice point. Now how the Ark of Utnapishtim would be 2,376 inches, and again that in hands that converts to 32376 again zeros. Doric rods. Now Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, these are, I've gone throughout this series another one, so I won't go into that too much. At the end I'll touch on it again, but this is especially the Doric, Ionic and Corinthian columns are still so important in Freemason traditions. And what we see here is a description of the Earth again. 3168 fingers or 3168 palm, 0000 on New Jerusalem, and the sun in Ionic cubits. So what we're getting is Earth and the sun, and we've had moon units as well. Moon units. That's now at 1728. So I mentioned the canonical cubit. That's 1.728 feet. Well, the volume of the cube, and this is important because we're going to look at. So it's not just one-dimensional units of length. We're going to also be seeing how in two-dimensional area as well as three-dimensional volume, these numbers will bring together and have this lovely harmony. And so because New Jerusalem is 12,000 by 12,000, okay, you will get that just, because it's a cube of 12. However, it goes beyond that. And so like for instance, at 1728 we have the sun and the moon, 12 cubed of course, and again in the yugas as well. So we see these cross cultures and these traditions coming back together. Now in tablet 11, it doesn't just describe it as the cube of 120 by 120 by 120 cubits. It also describes how much bitumen, how much pitch, how much oil was stored away, and even interesting how much oil was stored and how much was consumed during that time. So we have 10,800 and 1728 plus we've already seen it. So 3,600 at the very beginning. 3,600 in the Royal Babylonian scale also describes the edge length. But so there we see the units of pitch, bitumen, oil, and the stored oil. So 108, of course, 3,600 we began with that. We also have 7,272. Well, New Jerusalem, so on the feet in the Sumerian / Royal Babylonian / Indus / Saxon feet scale, that's 72,000 feet. And this 72 again is another it's a unity number once more. It's a harmony point between multiple sets of measures describing sun, earth, moon, and stars, and so many other aspects. And so, for instance, 1 degree of precession is 72 years. Essentially, one lifetime is 1 degree of the great year. But on the Ionic and the long scale, we have the sun, and once more multiple references to the moon. On the Ionic and the long scale again, we just see sun, earth, moon, stars, geometry, arithmetic, all the quadrivium emerging from these multiple sets of measures, all connected through these legends and so on. But like 72 again is one of the really beautiful numbers in this series of beautiful numbers, and
So for instance, the stars, precession, and the Earth, because 72 years on the Earth, 1 degree of precession. So stars and Earth, we also have sun and moon repeated in there. In geometry, so whether it's, again, the golden number, the pentagram, the pentagon, the vesica, always the vesica, by definition the hexagram, because the hexagon is 120 degrees, and that's why the vesica is so important, because it's really describing a hexagon. But two-dimensional geometry as well as three-dimensional geometry, the tetrahedron, 720 degrees. We've already seen the cube, the icosahedron, we'll see other, like the octahedron will appear as well. Now it's interesting, 72 degrees F is essentially room temperature, and 2953, you might be familiar with this set of digits. But even in musical scales, a Byzantine music is described 720p screen resolution, but also the ancient Roman weight scale, where we see 72 grains. So we have weights and measures, temperature, music. Again, harmony point, where we're getting to this 2953, where we've countless ancient sites embedding this particular number in there. It's a moon, sun, earth, moon number in the synodic month, 29.53 days. Body is 72% water and 72 heartbeats at resting. So we get some nice biology going on in there as well. But even in the yugas, so the Dwapara Yuga, 864,000 years, again, very beautiful number. It actually appears in here several times, and that's in the entry, the middle, and the exit point of this particular yuga, 72. And once more, even the Mayan calendar, 7,200 days. Again, all these connecting. Now, throughout for the Bible, Hermetic traditions, Old Testament, New Testament, we see 72 again being so essential across, and Osiris, what's the 72 accomplices plus Set? That would be the 73rd, 73 again, very, very important. But 72 connected to the story of Osiris, and Thoth one every 72nd day for the moon. He's the moon god. He's also the god of weights and measures and writing. That's why he holds the scribe, the stylus. But in Eastern traditions, so in literature, Confucianism, and even the Shaolin reference 72. Very, again, cross cultures. Now, more specific. So when they're describing the creation, and how much pitch, oil, and pitch and bitumen went into there, 10,800, 108. But even the maximum, so the edge length, now you add all the edges up that you can see on a cube at any one time, 1080 cubits, Royal Babylonian cubits. Now that will also join us to, by definition, because if it's a cube of 12, so we have the same number, 108, appearing again in New Jerusalem. But why is 108 is amongst these princely numbers? It's the Prince Regent, or right at there among the top echelons. And so in three-dimensional, actually in the crossing into the fourth dimension, we have this loveliness with 108. Connecting us to the golden ratio through cosine and sine, and 108 degrees, which is describing the pentagon and the pentagram, or throughout these, which in itself is a lovely description of the golden number, this most beautiful of beautiful numbers. Now, in geometry, it's again, so the octagon, square, or squares, the vesica, once more again, repeated in there. The triangle itself, we saw already 180, but how this will break down into units in seconds of 108. Of course, the vesica, the pentagram and the pentagon, and even the 30-degree pendulum, which is also important. 30 degrees is 108,000 seconds. So we see across geometry, you'll see it in music as well, pentatonic tuning, in astronomy, not only in the description of sizes, but even in the proportions. So 108 times the diameter of the moon is the distance from the moon to the Earth. 108 times the solar diameter is the distance from sun to Earth. 109.2 is much nicer, but 108 does work elliptical orbits. 108,000 kilometers per hour of Earth's orbital speed at its fastest point, which also describes Kronos or Saturn, and even the Sun, just like the Sun to the Earth, the Sun to Saturn. It's just one extra zero on the end, but multiply the Sun by 1080, get exactly the same thing. Lovely connection to Bode's law, which is so beautiful in geometry. It's interesting that in many astronomical journals it's actually forbidden to talk about Bode's law, but that's something else. Of course, 108 will appear in ancient weights and measure systems up until to this day, because we still see it's being so important. For instance, the yardstick, 108 barleycorn, stacks of timber were 108 cubic feet, the pipe or the butt of beer or wine, 108 gallons, and especially here in Australia, but like a full HD, 1080, 108, still in electrical systems, they're still using this. But especially here in Australia, so we have FM is 88 to 108 megahertz. In American region, it's slightly different, but Australia, even the AM radio with a 9 kilohertz separation, all these numbers will fall. It's divided by 9, and so you're going to get them in there. Australia's so rich in this tradition. But again, going back to ancient times, so whether it's Japamala with 108 beads, Vishnu 108 symbols, even his I forget the name of his disc, was like there was 108 teeth on there. In yoga, 108 sun salutations on the spring equinox. That's, of course, when the shadow appears on the Great Pyramid, as well as the Pyramid of Kukulkan. In South America, 108 chakras, pressure points. Across Eastern, even, well, I already mentioned in 72, why 72 and 36 is so important in Eastern traditions such as Shaolin, but you even see it being so. 108 stars of destiny, Sun Wukong. You could somersault 108,000 li in a single leap, and 72 transformations. And that since the first emperor of China, exact date not sure, but relatively early, is saying one must walk 10,800 li to achieve wisdom. It just, these are across time, cross cultures, cross disciplines, this number being so important, and in a random world it just wouldn't really work like that. But of course, the Treta Yuga, 1,296,000 years, that's how many seconds there are in a compass. 1,296. Times that by 2, you get essentially the processional numbers, just with a little couple zeros extra on the end. But to 25,920 years is the great year, and that's this number times 2, and then just take. But anyway, it breaks down into 108, just like earlier yugas, how they break down into 72, 144, and other such numbers. Well, we have 108 being so important here. And so the maximum visible surface, okay, so now we're looking at 2 dimensions, and so each at 120 by 120 cubits, that would be 14,400, the surface area of each face of the Ark of Utnapishtim, meaning that these you can see maximum 3 at one time of the cube, because you have to think it's a 3-dimensional object, and you have to have this multi-dimensional thinking when you're looking at it. It's not just about 1 dimension, not just about 2 dimensions, it's also about the 3rd dimension. And 43,200 square cubits is the maximum visible surface area, and of course, because of a cube of 12, this will also bring us to New Jerusalem. But 432, again, just one of the Kali Yuga, 432,000 years, the entire lifespan of a Manu, 4,320,000 years. 432 tuning, Vivesica, again, ancient weight systems, and also on this long scale at 1.056 feet, that happens to describe the diameter of the mean diameter of the Sun. The mean radius of the Sun is 43,200 miles. 432,000 miles, the mean radius. Exactly the same number we get appearing consistently, repeatedly, across time, cross cultures, across the world, across all of these legends, especially those connected with the flood cycles of destruction. And yet the pattern continues, and so again, it's a cube of 12, and so the total edge length, three-dimensional, we have to think first, second, third dimensional, 120 cubits times 12 would mean, so the total edge length, 1440 cubits. Of course, and well, so each face of this cube would have 14,400 square cubits. Now that, of course, would transfer to New Jerusalem, just a couple more zeros, and furlong slash stadia. So furlong in the King James Version, most other versions earlier would say stadia. However, at furlong, what we also get is in, again, the Royal Babylonian slash Sumerian scale, 144 and a bunch of zeros on the edge there. So because it's 12 by 12 by 12, we will get this, but the very specific choice of these units of measure also brings us to this very specific repeat of the number. And so 144, the sun, Longfoot, the moon, Longfoot scale, 1440 minutes per day, that would describe the earth. Ancient, the Roman measure scales, 1 duella, 144 grains, 1440p screen resolution, and again in Australia, because of the way they've designed the AM band, 1440 would be one of these places. Now again, the nonagon, so we already saw 132. Now we could do 24, we could do, okay, but 1440, 144,000 being the heart or the center angle of a nonagon. Again, the vesica, as we saw, again, it's not the same card, it's just the same numbers reappearing. And now the octahedron, another platonic solid, 1440 degrees, describes this platonic solid. If you add the 5 platonic solids together, 14,400. Again, same numbers, they just keep reappearing. And the Fibonacci sequence, the 12th Fibonacci is 144, which is 12 squared. That's a nice double connection there. And across the third, and as well if you include the fourth dimension, 144 and 1440 just happen to coming together. Now, one of the shortest papers ever written, math papers, is about the fifth dimension. And Euler's conjecture, well, 144 to the fifth, Now, each of, again, just bloody miraculous, let's call it that. The Satya Yuga already talked 1728. Well, that breaks down into units of 144, and the Mayan calendar, once again, 144,000 days. Now, the total surface area, so we talked 432 is the maximum visible surface area, but the total surface area of this three-dimensional object, the cube, which is a platonic solid in itself, 2,160 degrees, already went into that. Now that would also, again by definition, describe the cube of New Jerusalem, 12 by 12, but once more the Royal Babylonian scale actually brings us to this measure system once again, 864. Now, hats off to Edmund Gunter and the Hermeticists of the late 1500s, early 1600s, because they knew this and they just repeated it throughout their apparently random changes in the systems of weights and measure, the cathedrals and the buildings and the street plans of the time, just all, coincidentally, just all come back to this. Of course, nothing to see here. But why is that so? The Dwapara Yuga, 864,000 years of the mean diameter of the sun. I've got equatorial diameter there, I should say the mean diameter, measuring the sun or gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn. Boy, is going to be a bit of leeway in there, but 86,400 seconds per day, and the moon 86,400 kilometers per day, the orbital speed. So sun, earth, moon. Also just happens to be a lovely description of Jupiter, and 86,400 kilometers a day orbital speed of Saturn. Now that's that's smack bang in the middle of the minimum and the maximum and the average there. So just to give the details of there, Sun, Earth, Moon, Jupiter and Saturn. The Yugas, New Jerusalem, the Ark of Utnapishtim, basically give me a cathedral or a major public building, memorial, monument, You're going to get these numbers always, always, always. And 86,400, well, 86,400 seconds per day. Multiply the size of, including the sockets and the socle, mentioned that earlier. Multiply that by the height of the pyramid and the maximum visible base length of the pyramid. So if you stand at the corner, especially the northeast corner of a pyramid, that's the most you'll ever see of the base, and that's the most you'll ever see of the height. Multiply that by 86,400 and you get the description of the circumference of the Earth and the diameter of the Earth. No half measures, no need to look at the side view, then look at the top view and do a little bit of gymnastics. Just stand at the corner, multiply by 86,400 seconds, as in 86,400 seconds per day, 40 minutes per day, the same numbers that we've seen. Now it's also, and again, a 1 meter pendulum, you swing that between 30 degrees, and a 30-degree arc is 108,000 seconds. And just so happens that the Great Pyramid is 30 degrees north of the equator. Well, it's actually a slight bit less, but if you include some other atmospheric events, atmospheric properties, it is at 30 degrees north of the equator. But Heliopolis, using the standard GPS, go standard Heliopolis, you're exactly 30 degrees north of the equator. And that 30-degree arc also just happens to describe the Royal Egyptian cubit, which connects it to the meter, and again to 30 degrees the second, the meter, the cubit. 86,400 seconds per day, multiply that by the maximum visible base of a pyramid and the maximum visible height of a pyramid, you get a description of the whole Earth. So 43,200 is nice, but this describes it so much more elegantly and actually brings together all this system throughout, whether it's the Great Pyramid, New Jerusalem, the Ark of Utnapishtim, the Yugas, the ancient units of measure from the Indus, Sumerian through to the Egyptian, all connects. It all comes together and it describes a whole Earth from one point of view, no gymnastics required. And another interesting point, that at 120 raw Babylonian cubits, therefore the edge length of the Preserver of Life / Ark of Utnapishtim, 792 palms, 792,000 feet is the edge length of New Jerusalem. Another perfect unity number. Sun, Earth, and Moon, and the Gunther's chain. I mentioned Edmund Gunther, the surveyor's chain, which probably is the width of your street, which is the standard across, especially America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere. 66 feet. Just it's everywhere. But it also, of course, describes New Jerusalem, the Ark of Utnapishtim, and it just so happens to describe the speed of the solar system around the center according to best available information. Now, again, that might change over time as you get better info, but Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars just so happens to be in there, and I would, based on this, I would be, I would not be surprised that it, as we get better measurements over time, it will probably bear out. Also, lovely thing, 120 raw Babylonian cubits is 33 fathoms, and that just happens to convert to 3,300 ionic fingers, and we get 33 appearing on New Jerusalem once more, this all-important number 33. But that will also just happen to convert to 99,000 Doric span. You add a couple of zeros, you also get another ionic measure at 99. But what we have is ionic, and Doric appearing, unity point, multiple sets of measures of ancient systems coming together at very specific, lovely numbers which connect both cross-time, cross-cultures, the legends, but also, well, a deeper series of information. So what's so interesting about 33? Well, firstly, Freemason tracing board. You also find, of course, Rosicrucians, Theosophists, and others, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian column. So that's a school of architecture, Doric and Ionic. And what do we have? We also have the ancient measure systems, Ionic and Doric, appearing here. And of course, that's like I did a series on the Parthenon, Sanchi Stupa, all these other temples as well. And what do we get? Well, firstly, the Salamis stone, which is a constant point I bring back, is that it encodes the so-called allegedly modern English foot at least 2,500 years ago. And it's also a perfect, so 48 feet is 45 Doric, is 50 Ionic. Perfect unity point between multiple sets of measures, including bringing us the so-called modern foot back in some time ago. But what's special? So, okay, 33. Well, 33 and Freemasonry is inseparable. This is part of this ancient system, goes back, what are Masons? They're stone Masons. They go back to the cathedral builders and back to the Masons of Greco-Roman times, and the same in the stone workers and the guys who understood how to build ancient temples, knew how to work stone, knew the secrets of stone, knew the secrets of geometry and proportion, which is also important in creating a temple. And what's their basis? They work off measure systems. It's the foundation stone of these things. And so 33 now. 33 gods on Mount Meru, so we see it in the Eastern traditions. Now, just point me to a cathedral, and you'll see either a 33, so 32 around a 33rd central point in either the rose window or in the floor pattern or in the dome above, just the constant. You'll find that in modern Peace and Reconciliation in Astana. This is just a random one I could bring up, literally, hundreds of examples where the major public buildings have this same in there, not just some random 7-Eleven on the corner. I mean, state capitals, national capitals, major cathedrals, major monuments and memorials. For example, the Monument to Discoveries in Lisbon has this compass rose around it, 32 points around the 33rd core. And Portolan mapping, this ancient system of mapping, such as the Peri-Reis map is another example of it, this very old map which has the Antarctic coastline on there. It's the same mapping system, the Portolan mapping system. And what happens when you break it down? It's a series of each one of these points, these rose wheels, 32 directions coming off the 33rd central point. Ancient mapping systems. The US dollar, 32 feathers on one side, 33 on the other. All the other very important numerical as well as symbolic references, ancient, passed on. And UN map would be another example, 32 sectors around the 33rd, or the hub. And so we just see, ancient traditions right up until this very day, places such as Washington, Canberra, Brasilia, Astana, Rome, Paris, London, again, just constant and repeated, not a coincidence at all. It's part of this pattern. It's embedded with the quadrivium through weights and measures and symbols, all coming back to the same point. It's part of a system of knowledge about this lovely point where we have a unity, a harmony between multiple fields, geometry, arithmetic, music and astronomy, through weights and measures, which are an essential point in any civilization, any society, any system of law. You need these things. It's what, just like language binds a culture together, any nation, tribe, empire relies on standards of weights and measure. And where does this, goes back to Thoth, the guy, like he's literally, like I did a series on the measuring. This is a measuring wand, or the wand, as we think magic wand, Harry Potter. The origin of this word is actually a measuring rod, just like the measuring rod described in Revelations to describe New Jerusalem. But Hermes, the god of weights and measures, Mercury, the god of weights and measures, science, knowledge, and exactly the same as what Thoth is. We even see the snake symbolism, the twin snakes going around there, and it's gods of knowledge, gods of weights and measures, and they're embedded this in their temples, in the legends, in the street plans, in the standards of weights of gold or the measuring rods, and they just keep coming back. And we can use especially the Great Pyramid as this touchstone, or you could pick any of these ancient temples, as I've done throughout this series and other individual episodes. Every single time they always come back to this. It's part of a legacy. It's been passed on. There's knowledge here. There's wisdom to be extracted from this knowledge. And well, this will be episode 33, so that's why I'm going to leave it on 33. And I hope you enjoyed and have a good one. This method works, and it even predicts major monuments that haven't been built yet. It works.